The message wasn't long. It didn't need to be. I found out I no longer had a family from a WhatsApp notification. Not a phone call. Not a conversation. Not even the decency of saying it to my face. Just a message, sent to everyone except me. I only saw it because my cousin felt sorry for me and forwarded the screenshot with one line underneath. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you didn't know." At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The family group chat banner was familiar. The same one where birthday wishes, wedding photos, and fake "We are so proud of you" messages lived. My mother's name was at the top. Her profile picture was the same smiling face she used whenever neighbors were watching. The message read, "Mother's Day dinner this Sunday at 7 p.m. All my children are invited. I'm grateful that all of you chose successful paths in life." Below it, someone replied with heart emojis. Another wrote, "We'll be there, Mom." Then my mother sent another message. This one hit like a knife. "Except for those who chose to embarrass the family. I will not pretend anymore." No name, no explanation, but everyone knew who she meant. Me, the lowly teacher. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting for anger to come first. It didn't. Shock came instead, cold, heavy, paralyzing. My fingers felt numb. My chest felt hollow. I scrolled up, scrolled down, read it again, and again. Still no message for me. Still no invitation. Still no denial from anyone else. That's how you know it's real, when nobody defends you. I typed a reply at least 10 times. "Mom, what did I do?" Delete. "Why am I not invited?" Delete. "I'm still your daughter." Delete. In the end, I sent nothing. Because deep down, I already knew. I had been a disappointment long before that message. In my family, success had a very specific definition. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, business owner. Anything else was failure. And teaching. Teaching was what you did when you couldn't do better. I still remember the night I told them. We were sitting at the dining table, the same table where achievements were celebrated and mistakes were silently punished. "I got the job," I said, trying to sound proud. "I'll be teaching full-time." My father didn't look up from his plate. My mother's smile froze, not broken, just fake. My older brother laughed. "Teaching," he said, "like school teaching." "Yes," I said, "I love it." That was my mistake, saying I loved it. My mother put her fork down slowly. The sound it made against the plate was louder than her voice. "So after all the money we spent," she said calmly, "this is what you chose." I tried to explain, about the kids, about making a difference, about how teaching mattered. My father finally looked up. "Don't embarrass us," he said. That sentence followed me for years. At family gatherings, relatives would ask about my siblings first. The doctor, the startup founder, the one who made it. Then someone would remember me. "And what are you doing now?" They'd ask, tilting their head. Before I could answer, my mother often did. "She teaches," she'd say quickly, as if apologizing. No pride, no warmth, just damage control. The Mother's Day message wasn't sudden. It was the final confirmation, something I had been feeling for a long time. I didn't belong anymore. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment, the one they used to call temporary, even after years. The lights were off. My phone screen lit the room. I replayed memories I didn't ask for. My mother clapping loudly at my brother's graduation. Her quiet nod when I got my teaching certificate. My father flying across the country for my sister's wedding. Him being busy when I invited him to my first classroom ceremony. I realized something painful then. They hadn't disowned me that day. They had been letting me go, slowly. The message just made it official. 2 hours later, my mother sent another message in the group. This time, there was no ambiguity. "I will not associate with choices that reflect low ambition. I raised my children to be exceptional." Low ambition. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was cruel in such a clean, polite way. I was educating 32 kids every day, buying supplies with my own money, staying late so one child wouldn't fall behind. And to her, I was low ambition. I didn't cry that night. I packed, not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly. I folded clothes, put my teaching certificates in a folder, slid my childhood photos into a box. At 3:17 a.m., I stood in the doorway of my apartment and realized something terrifying. No one would notice if I disappeared, and that hurt more than the message. I moved to a different state 2 weeks later. No announcement, no goodbye post, no explanation. I blocked the family group chat, not out of anger, out of survival. For the first time in my life, I chose silence over begging. Years passed. Hard years. There were months I ate instant noodles and pretended I liked them. Days I questioned if they were right. Nights I cried in my car before going into my apartment. But there were also moments they never saw. The student who hugged me and said, "You're the first teacher who believed in me." The award ceremony, where my principal shook my hand with pride. The quiet confidence building inside me, brick by brick. I didn't become rich. I became strong. And that kind of success doesn't show up in family group chats. Then one morning, years later, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line made my heart skip. Formal invitation, state education excellence ceremony. I almost ignored it. Almost. I had learned not to expect things anymore. But I opened it, and as I read the words, something unfamiliar stirred in my chest. Not revenge, not validation. Something calmer, something dangerous. Because for the first time since that message, the world was about to speak my name out loud. And this time, they wouldn't be able to mute it. The silence after leaving was louder than any argument we'd ever had. At first, I checked my phone too often. Every morning, every night, sometimes in the middle of teaching, when my phone buzzed and my heart jumped for no reason. But the screen stayed empty. No, "Are you okay?" No, "We miss you." Not even anger. Just nothing. That's when I understood something most people never talk about. Being disowned isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet enough to make you question if you ever mattered at all. I learned how to be invisible. In my new state, no one knew my last name. No one compared me to siblings. No one asked why I hadn't done better. I was just a teacher. And for the first time, that didn't feel like an insult. Still, the damage followed me. Every parent-teacher meeting felt like a test. Every evaluation made my chest tighten. When my principal praised my work, a voice in my head whispered, "It's still not enough." That voice sounded a lot like my mother. Some nights were harder than others. I'd come home exhausted, sit on the floor instead of the couch, and let the quiet swallow me. I told myself I didn't care, that I was free. But freedom doesn't erase childhood programming. I remembered the way my parents used to introduce me. "This is our daughter," my mother would say, smiling tightly. "She teaches." That pause before the word, that subtle apology in her tone. I started to notice how deeply it had shaped me. I overworked. I overgave. I apologized for things that weren't my fault. Because somewhere inside me, I was still trying to prove something to people who had already made their decision. The first time I saw my family again was accidental. I was at a grocery store, holding a basket with bread and apples, when I heard my father's voice behind me. I froze. Not fear. Instinct. I didn't turn around right away. I stared at the shelf like it held answers. He was talking to someone else, laughing, the same laugh he used to reserve for my siblings' accomplishments. For a second, I imagined him seeing me. Imagined his face, surprise first, then calculation. Would he greet me? Ignore me? Pretend I didn't exist? I never found out. I walked away. My hands were shaking when I reached my car. But something else surprised me. I felt relief. Because chasing their approval had been heavier than losing it. Time moved forward, whether I wanted it to or not. My classroom became my refuge. The kids didn't care about my family name. They didn't ask what car I drove. They cared that I showed up. One afternoon, a student stayed behind after class. "Miss," she said quietly, "are you ever scared you're not good enough?" The question hit me harder than she could have known. I swallowed. "All the time," I admitted. "But that doesn't mean it's true." She nodded like I'd handed her something important. That moment stayed with me, because I realized something. I wasn't just teaching math or reading. I was teaching survival, the kind no one in my family had ever taught me. Years passed. I stopped checking the family group chat, stopped wondering what they thought of me, or at least I thought I had. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. "Hello," I said. There was a pause. Then my mother's voice. "We heard you moved," she said. Not a question, not concern, just information. I didn't answer right away. She continued. "Your sister mentioned it." Of course she did. News always traveled, just never directly to me. "I'm busy," I said finally. Another pause. Longer this time. "We're proud of your siblings," she added suddenly, as if reminding me of my place. That old familiar ache stirred. "I know," I said calmly. Silence again. She was waiting for something. An apology. A confession. Regret. I gave her none. "We'll talk another time," she said, annoyed now. "Sure," I replied. I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands weren't shaking this time, and that scared me more than the call itself. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I missed her, because for the first time, I felt something close to power. She had called me, not because she cared, but because something had changed. I didn't know what yet, but I felt it, like pressure before a storm. A few weeks later, my principal called me into her office. She smiled in a way that made my stomach flip. "We've submitted your name," she said, sliding a folder across the desk, "for a statewide recognition program." I blinked. "I don't think." "You think too little," she interrupted gently. The folder was thick. Letters, evaluations, testimonials, parents, students, administrators, people who saw me. I walked out of that office feeling something unfamiliar again. Not pride, validation, the kind that doesn't beg. I didn't tell my family, not out of spite, out of instinct. Some things are too fragile to share with people who once broke you. What I didn't know then was this: they would find out anyway, and when they did, they wouldn't recognize the person I had become. Success doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrives quietly, then waits to see who notices. I noticed it first in small ways. Emails started coming from people I'd never met. District officials asking for feedback. Administrators inviting me to panels. Parents requesting their children be placed in my class, if possible. At first, I assumed it was temporary. Luck, timing, a mistake. Because when you grow up being told you're less, you don't trust good things. You brace for them to be taken away. But they weren't. They multiplied. One afternoon, after a long school day, I opened my phone and saw a message request on social media. My sister. We hadn't spoken in years. Her message was short. "Hey, Mom mentioned you've been doing well." Doing well. That phrase used to be reserved for everyone but me. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing at first. Then irritation crept in. Not happiness. Not pride. Suspicion. I didn't reply. 2 days later, another message appeared. "We should catch up sometime." Catch up. As if we'd drifted apart naturally. As if no one had chosen sides. I left that one unanswered too. Because I'd learned something the hard way. People who ignored your pain don't get front row seats to your healing. The real shift came at a family wedding. A distant cousin, someone I barely knew. I debated not going, but curiosity won. I walked into the venue, prepared to be overlooked. Instead, conversation stopped. Not dramatically, just awkwardly. People stared a second too long, smiled a second too wide. A woman I didn't recognize approached me. "You're the teacher, right?" she asked. I nodded. Her face lit up. "My son talks about you constantly. You changed his life." She hugged me before I could react. Across the room, I saw my mother watching. Her smile was tight, uncertain. For the first time, she wasn't controlling the narrative. Later that night, my father approached me, hands in pockets, shoulders stiff. "You seem busy these days," he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was a probe. I replied. He nodded slowly, like he was reassessing something he thought he understood. No apology followed. None ever did. But the balance had shifted, and we both felt it. After that night, the calls started. Not often, just enough to test the waters. "How's work? Are you staying healthy?" Your mother was wondering. I answered politely, briefly, safely. I didn't offer details. I didn't need to. Because something interesting happens when people realize they misjudged you. They grow curious, then uncomfortable, then afraid they backed the wrong horse. The official letter arrived on a Tuesday. Thick envelope, government seal. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time before opening it. Not fear, respect. The letter congratulated me on being shortlisted for a statewide honor in education. It mentioned impact, leadership, excellence, words I'd never heard associated with my name at home. At the bottom was a sentence that made my breath catch. "Final recognition will be announced publicly at the annual ceremony." Publicly, I smiled, not because I wanted revenge, but because silence was no longer an option. I didn't tell my family, but someone else did. My brother called that evening. First time in years. "Is it true?" he asked without greeting. "Is what true?" I replied. "That thing, the award." I could hear something unfamiliar in his voice. Uncertainty. "It's not an award," I said calmly. "It's a process." "Oh," he said. A pause. "Well, congratulations anyway." It sounded forced, like someone congratulating a mirror that suddenly reflected something they didn't expect. That night, my mother texted. Not a call. A text. "We heard you might be attending an important event soon." Might. I stared at the message, then typed back one sentence. I'll let you know if it matters. She didn't reply, but I knew she understood exactly what I meant. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. They were waiting on mine. As the ceremony approached, my life felt strangely calm. I taught. I prepared lessons. I laughed with students. But under the surface, something was building. Not excitement. Finality. I realized something then. No matter what happened at that ceremony, win or lose, the person walking into that room would not be the child who begged to be seen. She would be someone else entirely. Someone who survived being erased and learned how to write her name back into the world. The closer the ceremony came, the louder my family became. Not openly, not honestly, strategically. My mother started liking my social media posts, ones she had ignored for years. My aunt commented under a photo of my classroom with exaggerated pride. So inspiring, so proud of our family. I didn't respond, because inspiration feels cheap when it arrives late. The invitation arrived a week later. Cream-colored paper, embossed lettering, formal language. It listed dignitaries, officials, special guests. And there it was. One line my eyes kept returning to. Attendance by senior state leadership. I folded the card carefully and placed it in a drawer. I didn't frame it, didn't post it. This wasn't about proving anything. This was about closing something. 2 days before the event, my mother called again. This time, her voice sounded different. Warm, almost proud. We were thinking, she said carefully. Maybe we could attend together. Together? The word felt foreign. I don't have extra seats, I replied. That wasn't true, but it felt necessary. There was a pause. Then she sighed. The sigh she used when she wanted sympathy without admitting fault. You know, she said, we only ever wanted the best for you. I didn't argue. I didn't agree either. I have to go, I said. And I meant more than the call. The night before the ceremony, I barely slept. Not because I was nervous, because memories kept knocking. The way my parents used to measure worth. The way love came with conditions. I thought about the child version of me, standing in front of them, explaining why teaching mattered. She never stood a chance. But I did now. The venue was massive. High ceilings, polished floors, security at every entrance. As I checked in, someone clipped a badge to my jacket. Finalist, it read. I took a deep breath. Inside, the room buzzed with quiet importance. Suits, dresses, laughter that sounded rehearsed. I spotted my family near the back. My mother waved the moment she saw me. My father stood straighter. My siblings looked unsure. They didn't approach. Not yet. When the ceremony began, the lights dimmed. A host stepped onto the stage, welcoming guests, praising dedication, sacrifice, service. Each word felt personal. Then names started being called, one by one. Applause followed each. My heart stayed steady, because I wasn't waiting for validation anymore. I was witnessing something. Then the tone changed. The host paused. This next recognition, he said, is reserved for an educator whose impact reached beyond the classroom. The screen behind him lit up. Photos appeared. A classroom I recognized. Students I knew. My students. The room went quiet. And to present this honor, the host continued. Please welcome the governor. My breath caught. Not excitement. Realization. I felt my family tense behind me. The governor stepped forward, smiling confidently. He spoke about education, about unseen heroes, about legacy. Then he looked down at the card in his hand and said my name. Clear, loud, impossible to ignore. The room erupted. Applause thundered. I stood, slowly, deliberately. As I walked toward the stage, I felt something lift off my chest. Years of being minimized. Years of being erased. Gone. I didn't look at my family. I didn't need to, because I knew, without turning around, their world had just shifted, and there was no undoing it. The applause followed me all the way to the stage, but it felt distant, like background noise to a moment that had been waiting years to arrive. I shook the governor's hand. He smiled at me like we already shared history. Thank you for what you do, he said, leaning in just enough for me to hear. Your work matters. 4 words, more honest than anything my parents had ever said. I faced the audience. Rows of faces blurred together. Cameras flashed. The microphone felt heavier than it looked. I could feel my family somewhere behind me. I didn't look, not because I was afraid, because this moment wasn't for them. I spoke about my students, about resilience, about the quiet power of showing up when no one is watching. I didn't mention sacrifice, I didn't mention rejection. I didn't mention the word family at all. And that omission said everything. When I finished, the applause came again, warmer this time. Real. Backstage, people congratulated me. Hands shook mine. Names blurred. Then my mother appeared. She moved carefully, like someone approaching something fragile. Her eyes were glossy. "You were amazing," she said. I nodded. "That was impressive," my father added, clearing his throat. I thanked them. Politely. Formally. Like strangers who had arrived late to something important. My sister hugged me. Too tightly. Too suddenly. "I always knew you'd do something big," she whispered. I almost laughed. Almost. But instead I stepped back. "That's kind of you to say," I replied. It was the kindest truth I could manage. Later, when the crowd thinned, my mother asked the question she'd been circling all night. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. I met her eyes. "Because you stopped listening years ago." The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. Silence filled the space between us. For once, she didn't interrupt. My father shifted uncomfortably. "We were hard on you," he admitted. "Not sorry. Just hard." I nodded. "I know." He looked relieved, as if acknowledgement alone was enough. It wasn't. That night, alone in my hotel room, I set the award on the table and stared at it. It didn't fix the past. It didn't rewrite childhood. But it did something else. It confirmed that my life had meaning, even without their approval, especially without it. The next morning, I woke up to messages. Old relatives, former classmates, people who once ignored me. "So proud. Always knew you'd shine." I muted them all, because pride that shows up after recognition isn't pride. It's convenience. My mother texted one last message. "We should talk, really talk." I stared at the screen. Then I replied. "We already did, on that stage." She didn't answer, and for the first time, I felt peace instead of guilt. The days after the ceremony felt strangely quiet. No rush, no dramatic fallout, just a steady hum of life continuing, as if the world had acknowledged me and then moved on. That's when I realized something important. The moment I had waited for didn't change my life. It revealed it. Back at school, nothing looked different. The same hallway smells, the same chipped desks, the same kids waiting for me at the door every morning. But they looked at me like I mattered. One student raised his hand and said, "My mom saw you on the news." Another asked, "Does that mean you're famous now?" I smiled. "No," I said. "It means teachers matter." That answer felt truer than anything else. My family didn't disappear. They hovered. My mother sent articles with my name highlighted. My aunt tagged me in posts calling me the pride of our family. I didn't correct her. I also didn't engage. Because boundaries don't require announcements. They require consistency. One evening, my father called. His voice was quieter than usual. "Your mother hasn't been sleeping," he said. I listened. "She keeps replaying that moment," he continued. "When the governor said your name, there it was. Not my pain. Not my years alone. That moment. I hope she finds peace," I replied. He waited. I didn't say anything else. A week later, my mother asked to meet. Neutral place. Coffee shop. She arrived early. Her hands shook when she lifted her cup. "I didn't know it hurt you that much," she said. I took a breath. "You knew," I replied gently. "You just didn't think it mattered." She flinched. That was the truth she hadn't prepared for. She cried. Quietly. Controlled. She apologized, sort of. For pressure. For expectations. Not for disowning me. Not for erasing me. I let her speak. Because sometimes listening is more powerful than forgiveness. When it was my turn, I spoke carefully. "I don't need you to understand my choices," I said. "I need you to respect them." She nodded. Too quickly. "I can do that," she said. I believed she wanted to. I wasn't sure she knew how. We parted without hugging. It felt appropriate. Closure doesn't always come with warmth. Sometimes it comes with clarity. That night, I went home and opened the drawer where I'd placed the ceremony invitation weeks earlier. I added something new beside it. A letter. From the state office. They wanted me involved in shaping future education programs. Not a title. Responsibility. Impact. I smiled. Because success had found me, not the other way around. The invitation from the state office changed everything. Not because of what it offered, but because of what it demanded. Visibility. Meetings. Panels. Public discussions about education reform. The kind of spaces my family once believed I'd never enter. I accepted without hesitation. Not to prove anything, but because I had earned the right to be there. The first panel was held in the Capitol. Long table, Microphones, name placards. Mine sat between two superintendents and a policy advisor. As I adjusted my chair, I felt a familiar presence behind me. My parents. They hadn't asked. They hadn't warned me. They just showed up. This time, I turned around. Our eyes met. My mother smiled nervously. My father nodded once. I didn't wave. I didn't scowl. I simply turned back to the table. And in that moment, something shifted. They weren't part of this chapter. They were observers. When it was my turn to speak, the room went quiet. I talked about underfunded schools, about teachers working 2 jobs, about students who carried adult worries in small bodies. I didn't soften it. I didn't dramatize it either. Truth didn't need decoration. At the end, someone in the audience stood. The governor. He applauded first. The room followed. I caught my mother's expression in the reflection of the glass wall. She was crying, not from pride, from recognition. After the panel, people surrounded me. Questions, praise, invitations. My father hovered at the edge of the circle. When it cleared, he approached. "You spoke well," he said. I nodded. "I never realized," he began. I raised my hand gently. "Please don't," I said. Not angry, just firm, because some realizations come too late to be shared. Later, my mother caught up with me in the hallway. Her voice was unsteady. "We raised you," she said. "Doesn't that count for something?" I looked at her. Carefully. "You raised expectations," I replied. I raised myself. The words landed between us, like a line drawn in permanent ink. She opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time in my life, she didn't have a response. That night, alone in my hotel room, I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Finished proving. Finished explaining. Finished shrinking. I realized something powerful. They hadn't disowned me because I was a teacher. They disowned me because my success didn't fit their script. And that was never my responsibility to fix. Weeks passed after the panel, and the world kept spinning faster than my family could adjust. Emails, meetings, interviews. My name began appearing in places I never imagined. Education journals, local news, newsletters for statewide programs. And still, my family hovered in the periphery, not asking, not inviting, just watching. It was the way they always had. The breaking point came at a conference dinner. I was seated at a long table with other educators, discussing programs and policies. The governor sat across from me, casually tossing compliments in between formal discussions. Then I felt it before I saw it. A presence at the entrance. My mother, my father, my siblings, all dressed to impress, like they were attending an award show instead of a professional dinner. I froze for a second. Then I reminded myself, this isn't about them anymore. They approached. My father cleared his throat. "We just wanted to see you, celebrate your achievement." I nodded politely. "Thank you." The words sounded short, almost mechanical. They were meant to be. My mother smiled tightly. "You've come so far, it's inspiring." I replied calmly. "It's been a long journey." No emotion, no apology, no begging, just acknowledgement. Then my sister tried to bridge the gap. "We never really understood," she said. "But you've proved yourself." I let her words hang in the air for a second. Then I said something I had rehearsed in my mind for years. "I don't need your understanding. I needed your respect." Her face fell. It was subtle, but it landed. I turned away from the table and returned to my own seat. And for the first time, I felt free. Later that evening, I walked outside onto the terrace. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath me. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Can we talk tomorrow?" I read it, then typed a reply. We already did, on that stage, and in the halls of every place I've earned my name. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. That night, I reflected on everything. The years of silent pain, the loneliness, the rejection, the constant need to prove myself. I realized it wasn't just about recognition. It was about claiming my life. Every choice I'd made, every struggle I'd endured, every moment I'd spent building myself from the pieces they discarded. And now, I could finally breathe. The next morning, my award sat on the shelf in my office. It wasn't a trophy anymore. It was a reminder, not of validation, not of revenge, but of survival and triumph. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want their approval, because I didn't need it. The day of the statewide ceremony arrived. Unlike the last time, I wasn't nervous. I was focused, calm, controlled. The auditorium was massive. Hundreds of seats filled with educators, politicians, parents, and students. Cameras flashed, capturing every smile, every polite nod. I walked in head high, every step measured, every breath deliberate. As I reached my seat, I noticed them immediately. My parents, my siblings. They had secured seats near the back, a calculated move to observe rather than participate. I didn't glance their way. I didn't need to. They had seen me win quietly before. This time, they would see me claim the spotlight. The ceremony began. Speeches, applause, small acknowledgments. And then, the moment came. Our next awardee, the announcer said, has transformed education in ways most never thought possible. Please welcome. The screen behind him lit up. My name in bold letters. My photo. My students smiling beside me. The audience erupted. Cameras clicked. Hands clapped. And somewhere behind me, I felt a shift. The faint whisper of recognition from people who had once erased me. The governor stepped forward. His eyes met mine. A nod, a smile. Your dedication, he said, voice steady. Your impact and your relentless commitment to students everywhere make you a true leader. Please come forward. I walked, step by step, each movement deliberate, and as I reached the stage, I turned slightly, catching the faces of my family in the audience. Shock, confusion, silent awe. They had underestimated me for years, and now there was no denying it. I accepted the award. The applause was deafening, and then I spoke, not loud, not to impress, but enough for them to hear. This isn't just about me. It's about the kids who never had a voice, the teachers who never had support, the educators who kept going even when no one noticed. This is for all of them. I let my gaze sweep across the room. My mother's eyes glistened. My father's jaw tightened. My siblings fidgeted. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The room knew. They understood. I didn't have to say anything else. After the ceremony, I stepped off the stage. Media interviews, photo ops, congratulatory handshakes, invitations to speak at panels. And my family, they lingered at the back, like spectators who had arrived too late. I walked past them without a word, not out of cruelty, but because some lessons only land when experienced firsthand. That night, alone in my hotel room, I placed the award beside the one from the previous ceremony. 2 trophies, 2 milestones. Neither of them erased the past. Neither of them needed to. They were proof that even when erased, ignored and disowned, a person could rise. And I had risen. The weeks after the ceremony were quiet, not empty, not insignificant, quiet in the way of someone who has finally claimed their life. My parents tried to reach out occasionally. Small gestures, likes on posts, tentative messages. I didn't respond, because respect isn't given. It's earned, and mine had been earned long ago. At school, everything felt right. Students smiled, teachers nodded, administrators consulted me. I had power, not arrogance, not dominance. Power that came from competence, dedication, and integrity. My success wasn't for anyone to approve. It simply existed. One evening, my mother showed up at my classroom. No announcement, no ceremony. She leaned against the doorway, silent, hesitant. I just wanted to see you, she said softly. I looked up from the lesson plan in front of me. Calm, composed. You're welcome to observe, I replied. She nodded silently. No words about the past, no excuses. And that was enough. Because closure isn't about apologies. It's about boundaries. Months later, I received a letter from the governor's office. They wanted me on a task force to shape statewide education policy. I accepted, not because of recognition, not because of fame, because I had a voice now, one that couldn't be erased, ignored, or diminished. And for the first time, it felt like I was finally living life on my own terms. My parents called occasionally after that. Sometimes they asked questions. Sometimes they complimented me. I listened politely, answered politely, but I never asked for their validation, because I had learned something far more important. No one gets to define your worth but you. Not your parents, not your teachers, not even the world. I stood on my balcony one evening, overlooking the city. The lights stretched endlessly. The air smelled like possibility. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who begged, who cried, who waited for approval. I smiled. She survived. She thrived. And she finally understood the truth. No one can disown you unless you let them. I hadn't just survived their rejection. I had used it to build a life they couldn't take away. And that was worth more than any trophy, any applause, any recognition. Because some victories aren't visible. They live quietly. They live strongly. They live forever.